Good morning. Today is Wednesday, and I just finished up working with some clients. And I wanted to share this video, and the topic of this is releasing wanting to be right. And I focus upon that because I've seen in so many relationships, so many friendships, just so many situations where people continually fight to be right, not realizing that by doing that, it takes people further and further away from each other. It starts to create this separation rather than the understanding that we're all interconnected. And so I often will share with people that I see in that situation. I'll ask them a simple question: do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And it kind of catches them off guard. And then I also find myself in situations where if I'm in a conversation with someone who is so committed to being right, I just kind of release it and I share with him or her and say, you know what, I'm just going to let you be right, which also catches people off guard. But the reason that I share that, because I've learned it's ineffective to attempt to have a conversation when people are fighting to be right rather than what the conversation is truly about. And when you release wanting to be right, what it does is it gives you an opportunity to become aware of the understanding of different people's beliefs. You can go back to the old Stephen Covey days, the simple rule: seek first to understand rather than to be understood. What happens when people are in a situation where they're both fighting to be right, or one's fighting to be right, no one's being heard. Nothing is being resolved, and you can never engage in some type of even compromise because the commitment is too strong of wanting to be right. And when that happens, again, the separation starts to occur and people start to shut each other out. So think about it when you're in these in-depth conversations. Are you there to try to prove yourself to be right? Or are you just stating your opinion? Because that's the other thing that I have found is even when you're in conversation, if people start to share and share their opinion and are continually attacked right away because this person's so committed to being right, then again, that kind of puts the whole conversation at a standstill. And so with that, I want to share a story. When I was up in Phoenix, Arizona, oh, it hasn't been that long ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, and I was on their public transit system, first time that I was on there. And I was coming back from playing golf. And it was quite a distance coming back from Phoenix is huge, so I was probably in one of the suburbs, and I was sitting on the bus, and I walked in, and there was this young kid. I call him young. He was probably 21, 22, and he had his little earphones on, and he was sitting there to the beat, and then he looked up and he saw me, and then he took his earphones off and he started to have a conversation, and as we were talking, I asked him what his name was and what he did, and he was asking me questions, and he said, I like older women. Now, I wouldn't have been offended, and I wasn't offended because I knew he was like 20 something. And I just kind of laughed, and across from him was his buddy. And I said, is that your friend sitting over there across from you? And he said, yeah. And I could tell because he was observing, his friend across was just observing everything. And as I was having this conversation with him, of course, he tried to be all charming, and I'm just kind of smiling on the inside. Another gentleman heard our conversation. He obviously thought that maybe this young kid was bothering me, which he wasn't by any means at all. So he came over and started having a conversation with me, and the young kid put his earphones back on and went back to his dance and his beating. Well, it was probably about 2 miles later. We have certain stops. So there was a stop, and another gentleman got in. Young gentleman walked in, and I noticed he had a book with him. And when he sat down, he started to read the book. And as he was reading the book, this other young kid's friend that was directly across from him started to ask him questions. And he began to ask him questions on what he was reading. And I pretty much knew because I glanced over what he was reading. He goes, I'm reading the Quran. And so the gentleman across from him, African American, talking to, an American Muslim, he was reading the Quran. And so this gentleman, the other gentleman asked him, he said, well, explain to me what the Quran entails. And so they started to have this conversation. I start to overhear it as this gentleman over here was having a conversation with me, but I was really wanting to listen on, and I was watching the interaction of these two young kids. And then I kind of laughed because the one guy on the other side, he asked him, he said, well, he goes, why do you guys pray so much? And the other gentleman, I start laughing. He goes, we do that to keep ourselves in a state of peace and calmness, which to me immediately hit on, it's no different than meditation. And so they continually had conversations, and he was inviting him to, the Muslim was inviting the other guy to go to the mosque to learn more if he was open to it. And they exchanged information. And the gentleman got off because we went by the Muslim mosque, which is where he was going. And I just thought that was such an amazing interaction to watch, because it was a time right after the things in California had happened, and people could make judgment when people walk in, and to see these two souls, with different backgrounds communicating and talking and listening to each other, I thought it was awesome. It was not this gentleman, it wasn't the Muslim trying to prove or say that his belief system was right, and it wasn't the African American wanting to attack or say that his belief system was right. It was an open conversation between these two young people that just wanted to understand each other. And when you stay in a state of seeking first to understand rather than to be understood, then you allow doors open to connect people and to bring us together and to create a more understanding of. And so I just wanted to share that story and to share with you that release being right. Be open to seeing all sides. Because if you are so focused on being right, that means someone has to be wrong. And with wrongness comes judgment. And so I just wanted to share that story. That's my lesson for today. Become aware of when you're in a conversation, am I fighting to be right? Is the other person just wanting to be right? Or are we actually engaged in a conversation where we're working to understand each other? Seek first to understand rather than to be understood. Well, happy Wednesday. We'll, until next time. All right, bye-bye.